For decades, the technology industry has led in agility, especially for software development. That agility has extended to the way tech companies operate. They're nimble, fast-moving, process-light by design. This pace and disregard for heavy process is often held as a badge of honor in the industry. Improvisation, innovation, and speed have been a fair trade-off for some of the downsides of operating this way. Companies tolerate unclear ownership, muddy decision rights, 2 or 3 teams working on the same thing, and excess capacity being eaten up by side projects. Internal processes are never written down and perpetually under construction. Early in the industry, this was a fair trade-off. Rapid growth was the most important thing. Not trim teams, not refined operations, and certainly not heavy process. That's no longer always true. The rules that once rewarded only speed and experimentation have changed slightly. As the market consolidates, tech organizations are larger, more interconnected, and under greater pressure to deliver consistent growth. The wave of automation enabled by AI technology will accelerate this shift. Turning work over to agents requires clear processes, accurate data, and the ability to converse about how work gets done. This is unfamiliar and uncomfortable territory for many in the industry who have been steeped in this purposeful, almost irreverent tech culture for a long time, including executive leadership. It's my belief that performance in 2026 will depend not only on pace and growth, which are still essential, but also refining how organizations are designed to operate at scale. 2026 is a turning point because multiple forces are converging at once. Do you notice that almost every internal project requires involving multiple teams? Operational work is more complex than ever, and the executive alignment, technical governance, and coordination required is more than most operating models were ever designed to handle. The cost of missing dates and outcomes on these efforts is very high. Meanwhile, tech companies are rapidly evolving their offerings to compete. This means more M&A, more shifts in strategic direction, and more divestitures to shed certain parts of the business that aren't growing. Internally, AI automation is moving from isolated experiments into the core of how work gets done. Automation has become table stakes. It's no longer just bonus points. Individually, none of these are new, but taken together, this becomes a rising tide. What used to feel like a few big projects a year now shows up as expansive risk, quarterly uncertainty, and constant organizational churn. In 2026, sound business strategy alone will not be enough for success. Organizations also have to up their game in operating discipline and execution to be successful.
So what we're seeing now is that a lot of enterprises have simply outgrown the systems that organize their work. And I don't mean the technology systems. The issue isn't that companies don't have the talent or the technology that they need. It's that the system around the work hasn't kept up with the complexity of the work itself. So a simple way to think about this is that most operating models that I have seen were designed for a world that looked like a quiet residential neighborhood. Each function owned its own lane, the dependencies were limited and super manageable, and really the traffic moved in a fairly predictable way. But that's just not the reality of how work happens anymore. Today, almost any meaningful initiative is going to cut horizontally across an organization through product, engineering, finance, HR, data, etc. And so what ends up happening is that we have this highway level traffic running through these neighborhood streets that simply were not designed to handle that load. And when the rules of the road aren't really clear and who owns the decision, how trade-offs are going to get resolved, and what truly has to come now versus next or later, or maybe not even at all, then things slow down in a fairly predictable way. And in this case, teams start relying on workarounds. Decisions that don't need to be start getting escalated. Portfolios quickly grow beyond the capacity that we have any hope actually delivering against. And teams end up being spread across too many initiatives. The roadmaps look super full and everything feels equally urgent, but very little of it fully lands. And the cost isn't abstract. You see it in stalled initiatives, rising risks, and leaders who end up spending most of their time unblocking traffic rather than setting direction and truly leading. In short, you can scale the teams and the tools, but if you don't scale the operating model around them, execution is going to start to degrade. So what we're seeing in the organizations that are actually starting to make some progress is actually pretty straightforward. They're not chasing the perfect org chart or some sexy technology. They're doing a few things really consistently though. First, they're clarifying the rules of the road. Everyone understands how decisions are made and who owns each of them. And authority is pushed closer to where the work actually happens than constantly being escalated up the chain. Second, they build better intersections between teams. How the work flows across product and engineering, operations, data, etc., is standardized so that collaboration doesn't have to be reinvented every time we bring two teams together to work. And they treat governance less like bureaucracy and a little bit more like traffic control, something that actually keeps the work moving quickly and safely instead of slowing it down. And just as importantly, they build some real discipline around capacity and value. They shrink portfolios, they consolidate platforms, and they align commitments with what teams can realistically deliver. Because at the end of the day, speed doesn't come from pushing more cars onto the road. It comes from designing a system where traffic can actually flow. And AI is about to put a whole lot more traffic on those roads.
One of the most important lessons we've learned over the last 2 years is that AI doesn't create cracks, it exposes them. Bad business processes, incomplete data, unclear ways of working, those things become clear when AI is implemented. It's rare to achieve success when you implement AI on top of bad business process. The organizations that are succeeding today with AI, or the organizations that are using this as the catalyst to reinvent the way they work. AI is evolving from a tool to an operating layer. We're moving from passive agents to autonomous orchestration. The reality is though, if your organization isn't ready, your business processes, your governance, your data foundations, then AI isn't going to scale. And what you're going to end up with is an expensive science project that is just high on hype and low on impact. Realizing full value from AI requires a complete business transformation. The organizations that are getting the most value aren't just buying the next expensive models. They're using this as an opportunity to redesign the way that they work so that they can create outcomes and not just activity.
The final pressure point is people. AI is reshaping work faster than organizations can redesign themselves. Roles are changing in real time, tasks are evolving to include humans and AI, and the org chart no longer matches how work actually gets done. The old model, spending years modernizing job architecture, doesn't make sense today when AI and automation are advancing so quickly. Take product development. AI can generate design options, analyze user data, and simulate outcomes, but leaders need to decide where the big bets are going to be made and align teams around them. The work is increasingly shared between humans and AI, and that's changing how teams operate. If you look at most org charts today, they still show clean reporting lines. But the reality of the work is that you have multiple roles across multiple functions coming together to collaborate on a shared initiative. Rigid structures just aren't serving organizations anymore. Organizations need to move from a model that shows how authority flows to reflecting how value gets created. So, what does that mean for leadership? Work is increasingly organized around human AI tasks and dynamic work groups that come together to create an outcome. Leaders are no longer just managing people. They're designing systems where humans, AI, and workflows all come together to create value. Thriving leaders today bring together 3 capabilities. The first is domain expertise. That has always been there and is still critically important. Understanding the industry, the customer, and the function they lead. The second is AI leverage, knowing how to amplify work with the power of AI, redesigning roles and workflows to incorporate AI and create value. And the third is a uniquely human skill, strategic judgment, focusing teams on the decisions and outcomes that actually drive value. I'm optimistic about the future of work. There is plenty of room for humans, but the talent systems that support organizations will fundamentally look different. The opportunity for chief people officers is to be the architects of this AI-era workforce, redesigning skills, leadership models, and how humans and AI collaborate to create value. But the organizations that win in this new era won't be the ones with the most advanced AI tools. They will be the ones that redesign how work gets done.
The organizations that thrive in 2026 will treat transformation as a system, not a set of projects. They'll strengthen operating discipline, build AI-ready foundations, and equip leaders and teams to navigate continuous change with clarity. These elements reinforce each other, and when they're designed together, they actually create something increasingly rare: predictable performance in a complex world. That's why we're calling 2026 the year operational discipline becomes a strategic advantage. If you're thinking seriously about execution, AI readiness, and leadership capabilities in 2026, we've pulled all of this together into our 2026 Tech Industry Insights Report. It's our way of showcasing for leaders what to change and where to start.